The grey November air hangs heavy over New York City, a city accustomed to drama, but today standing at the threshold of political history. Streets are lined with voters, campaign volunteers, and a press corps that has tracked every twist in what may become one of the most consequential municipal elections in America's modern era. This morning, the sidewalks outside a modest polling station in Queens echoed with footsteps and muffled excitement as Democrat Zohran Mamdani, long regarded as the insurgent voice of the city's progressive wing, emerged after casting his ballot. Minutes later, he arrived before the microphones and cameras at a nearby press space, where anticipation surged through reporters waiting to capture his first public remarks since voting. His suit was simple, his demeanour calm, but his words, as the nation would soon witness, carried a force sharpened by months of grassroots mobilization and the rising tensions of a polarized political environment. Journalists shifted forward as Mamdani listened intently to questions. Behind him stood campaign aides who had spent the morning coordinating turnout drives across 5 boroughs. The hum of city traffic filtered in from outside, blending with the rustle of notepads and the mechanical rhythm of camera shutters. It was a moment not only of electoral significance, but of civic weight, the kind that defines the trajectory of a metropolis and signals a broader political mood across a divided nation. Then, with composure and clarity, he began to speak. His tone did not carry the triumph of a projected victor, but the urgency of a civic advocate confronting what he views as threats to democratic participation. His remarks opened with a story, and with it, a forceful accusation aimed at the highest levels of federal power. I saw a young woman sharing a story of her mother who had voted for our campaign and was then harassed by another man at that poll site for doing so. And we have to understand this as part of the general approach the Trump administration has taken to trying to intimidate voters with baseless allegations of voter fraud as a means of trying to repress the voice of Americans across this country. And when we think about how best to fight Donald Trump, one way we can do so is by understanding Andrew Cuomo for what he is, the candidate endorsed by Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Stephen Miller. And with those words, the stakes of this election were laid bare. Mamdani was not merely defending his campaign, he was framing the moment as a battle for democratic integrity. His mention of voter harassment at a polling place revealed the raw edge of confrontation simmering throughout the election cycle. His critique of former President Donald Trump was pointed and unequivocal, accusing him not only of encouraging intimidation, but of leveraging false narratives to suppress civic participation. To many listening, this was no ordinary mayoral race. It had become a referendum on political intimidation, on generational change, and on the direction New York should take in a country where democracy itself has become contested terrain. Mamdani's reference to Andrew Cuomo, his rival and a former governor attempting a political comeback, further underscored the deep ideological divide shaping this contest. It was an election not simply of policy differences, but of competing visions for the city's future and its identity on the national stage. As he continued, Mamdani shifted from condemnation to aspiration, his voice rising with the cadence of conviction born from years of organizing in neighborhoods far from the glass towers of Manhattan. We are on the brink of making history in our city, on the brink of saying goodbye to a politics of the past, a politics that tells you what it can't do, and really what it means to say is what it won't do, and to usher in a new era in this city where we understand that we do not get to choose the scale of the crisis we face. We simply get to choose the manner in which we respond, and it is time to finally respond with the urgency that New Yorkers deserve. In those sentences lay the architecture of his political philosophy, one that does not minimize the hardships afflicting New York, from housing shortages to economic inequities, but demands bold solutions over cautious incrementalism. It is a message that resonated across boroughs where working-class families have struggled with affordability crises, renters have fought against displacement, and communities long neglected sought investment and recognition. Reporters scribbled rapidly, some nodded as he spoke, others typed furiously, already imagining tomorrow's headlines. Outside, supporters gathered behind metal barricades, held signs and chanted, their voices swelling each time his words drifted through the speakers. Campaign volunteers, many young and first-time political participants, captured clips on their phones to share with followers across social media another arena where this election had been fought vigorously. Beyond the immediate commotion, New Yorkers watching from living rooms, subway platforms, and office break rooms understood the gravity of this moment. In a city known for its political resilience and diversity, Mamdani's rise has signalled a larger shift, a generational pulse, a demand that power reflect the lived experiences of those furthest from decision-making halls. His campaign grew not from establishment endorsements, but from community centres, student groups, labour organisers and small donor networks stretching across boroughs. When he returned to the microphone for a final remark, his message turned toward governance, collaboration and the structural work ahead should he officially assume office. I'm looking forward to working alongside the City Council in delivering the kind of investments that so often communities have been denied, and ensure that we understand the strength of this city be measured by the neighbourhoods furthest from City Hall, not by the ones just closest. It was a closing vision rooted in equity, a promise that the success of New York would no longer be judged by Midtown skylines or Wall Street indices alone, but by the opportunities available in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island and Queens. It was an invitation and a challenge, asserting that civic power must not be confined to geographic or economic privilege. In the minutes that followed his remarks, questions continued from journalists probing policy specifics, political strategy and voter turnout trends. Mamdani's responses remained measured, grounded in themes of empowerment, accountability and resistance to intimidation. Outside, volunteers continued knocking on doors, sending text messages and encouraging neighbours to vote, a reminder that even after votes are cast, democracy is upheld by the endurance of civic participation. As afternoon light stretched across the city's avenues, polling stations remained busy. New Yorkers arrived in waves, young professionals rushing before work shifts, elders steadying themselves with canes, parents guiding children who watched wide-eyed as their guardians fulfilled a civic responsibility. Cameras tracked the moments. Photographers captured faces marked by hope, determination and fatigue, the textures of democracy in motion. On social media, claims and counterclaims swirled around turnout numbers and voter intimidation accusations. Political figures weighed in. Commentators traced the parallels between this local race and broader national struggles over power, identity and representation. Across cable networks, analysts debated whether Mamdani's surge marked a realignment in urban politics or a singular moment born from unique social and economic pressures. What was undeniable and impossible to ignore was the symbolism radiating from this election. It was not only a contest between candidates, but between ideas about who a city belongs to and who gets to shape its future. For some, Mamdani represents a disruptive force challenging entrenched interests. For others, he embodies the promise of a more inclusive and ambitious civic vision. As evening approached and the final hours of voting ticked away, New York stood on alert. The city that never sleeps prepared for another defining night when precincts would tally ballots, watch parties would erupt in cheers or sighs, and political futures would crystallize or collapse. In campaign headquarters across boroughs, staff huddled over laptops, refreshing data streams and coordinating with field organisers who tracked turnout district by district. Mamdani's press conference, brief in duration but expansive in message, now circulated widely. Video clips trended online. Supporters shared his remarks as rallying calls. Critics dissected them through ideological lenses, and undecided voters listened, weighing conviction against caution. This was politics in real time, unfiltered and urgent. By the time night falls and results begin to arrive, whatever the outcome, this day will stand as a testament to the enduring power of civic engagement. It will be remembered not just for ballots cast, but for voices raised, for accusations challenged, for a candidate's refusal to remain silent in the face of intimidation, and for a city's determination to define its own future. Whether history records Zohran Mamdani as the next mayor or as a catalyst for a movement that continues beyond this election cycle, the message he delivered today resonates beyond city limits. It echoes in conversations about democracy, accountability, and who is allowed to exercise power in America. And in the streets of New York, from Harlem sidewalks to Staten Island ferry decks, from Jackson Heights bodegas to Coney Island boardwalks, people will replay his words, debate his vision, and weigh their hopes for the city they call home. Because at its heart, this election is not simply about who leads, but about who belongs. And in that question lies the soul of New York.